It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is the Larry Kudlow Show, and it's a great pleasure to be with you again. And please join us during the week. Fox Business Network, FBN. Name of the show is Kudlow, Monday through Friday. And it runs at 4 to 5 p.m. every day, 4 to 5 p.m. And if for some reason you can't get there at 4, please just text your favorite 9-year-old, and she will show you how to DVR the show. That's all it takes. And here, you can listen to us on the internet, live stream us on the internet, LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. Heard all across the country, around the world, throughout the solar system, including the Milky Way. Remarkable. Modern science, the Milky Way. So, let's begin with the debate. The debate, capital T, capital D, Thursday night. And I want to make a couple points. We're going to focus on it during the show. We've got political analysts, got Joe Concha, we got David Webb, we got Kevin Hassett, we got all kinds of great people, John Carney, so forth. But look, at the start, I want to make this point. I understand that one of the key headlines is the collapse of Joe Biden. I understand that. His crash, his burn, I don't know what. He had a cold. Raspy voice. He could barely walk onto the stage. After the debate, his wife had to help him off the stage. He stared into the air. He had a quizzical, strange look on his face. I don't know what it is. You know, I'm not a doctor, whether he had a cold or he has cognitive problems or he has dementia problems. I can't really speak to that, except that his performance was awful, catastrophically awful. And you got a lot of people on the left, liberal left, New York Times calling for him to step down, et cetera, et cetera. And you got Bill Clinton and Barack Obama defending him. All right. We'll talk about the politics of this later on in the show. As I said, we got Joe Concha and David Webb coming on, two of the smartest of the smart. But I want to raise sort of a counterpoint to this. I'm not burying the Biden problem's the Biden problem. I mean, anybody looking at that thing could see clearly how inept and frail and not up to the job. I mean, Xi Jinping probably saw it. You could bet that. Vladimir Putin saw it. You can bet the mullahs in Iran saw it, and it may well be a national security risk. Okay, more on that later. But I don't want to obscure the masterful performance of Mr. Donald Trump. That's a key point I want to make here at the opening. Biden was a catastrophe, but Trump was masterful. He kept us cool. He had a straight-laced sort of chief executive type demeanor. He was sharp, he was energetic, and he was on message. That's so important. And I think the liberal media, they're all beating up on Biden, and they're saying, yeah, Trump won the debate because Biden was so bad, so sick, so ill, so something. Wait a second. I'm going to argue that Trump's masterful performance with a positive, optimistic, prosperity, opportunity, and economic growth message, Trump picked up a lot of new votes on Thursday night. Independents, Democrats, I don't know who they are, but he widened his net. He widened his electoral vote-getting scope. And, of course, nobody's writing about that, right? Nobody's writing about that. So I'm going to talk about it. I wrote about it. It was the riff last night on our Fox Business show, Kudlow. It's up on the Fox Business digital website. It's in the New York Sun this morning. Right at the top, Early part of the debate, Trump says, I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. Right there. Cut taxes, roll back regulations, jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Biden was, befuddled, couldn't put two sentences together, tried to lie his way out the way he always does, tried to blame Trump. I inherited the worst economy. I inherited a high inflation rate. No, no, no. Trump kept saying successful policies will grow the economy, keep the peace, bring unity. Here's a direct quote. My retribution is going to be success, Trump explained. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut the regulations that gave jobs. But he's putting a lot of those regulations back on all the things we've done. There you have it. And Trump stayed on message. Look, the two biggest issues, his meat and potatoes, the border catastrophe and the crime wave that goes along with that, and the economy. Stayed with those meat and potatoes again and again. And Biden had no response. Of course he didn't have a response. Because on his watch, he opened the border and all the catastrophe that followed. Crime, end of public safety, these beautiful women raped, murdered, every day there's something, attacking cops, Venezuelan gangs, fentanyl, all of it. What's he going to say? Oh, he's going to yell at Trump about January 6th or call him names like he did, like a grade school kid trying to call names. Looked awful. But Mr. Trump stayed on message, on the border, on the economy, his meat and potatoes. So I'll read another one. Naturally, Biden talks about January 6th, his great mantra. What happened on January 6th? And Trump had an absolutely brilliant riposte. I'm going to read. On January 6th, as Trump said, on January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, a very few. On January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest regulations ever on January 6th. We were respected all over the world on January 6th. Tremendous response. And at that point, I think this boxing match should have been called off. It was a TKO, technical knockout, right there. Right there. By the way, we're going to get to some court cases. Special counsel Jack Smith's whole case against Trump on January 6th was just completely undercut by some important Supreme Court decisions that were announced yesterday that will eliminate 2 of the 4 charges against Trump. The whole case may be gone now because the Supremes took away the so-called Enron violation. We'll talk about that with Greg Jarrett later in the show. A couple more points on Mr. Trump's performance. On abortion. It's supposed to be a big issue for Biden and the Democrats. And here, too, Trump was equally deft. He defended the Supreme Court decision to move the matter to the states. He defended his judicial appointees to the Supremes. He also emphasized his view that he personally wants to preserve exclusions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And then Trump launched into the radical extremist Democrats. I'll read you the quote. The problem they have, he said, is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. And he went on, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, well, put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. This, by the way, is what Trump said to Hillary Clinton in the third debate in September of 2016. When she started going off about abortion, and Trump raised the point that Hillary and the Democrats were in favor of partial birth, of either killing the baby in the last month, ninth month, or even after, which is a horrific thought. No human being would want such a thing. And that's a Democrat's position. You hear it all the time. Biden had no answer to that. Now, wait a minute. Biden then starts prattling on. He says, it's a stream of consciousness. He said the idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in. They talk about that, meaning that Lake and Riley or the woman in the Baltimore suburbs. But here's the deal. There's a lot of young women to be raped by their father-in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous. What does that mean? What is he talking about? Is he talking about immigration? Is he talking about abortion? No one knows. No one knows what he was talking about. And then Trump just came right at him again with migrant crime, which has swept the country and has been full of violence, rape, and murder. Unfortunately, terrible. I mean, part of the open borders problem is that public safety throughout the country has been ruined because of criminals coming across the border, gangs, sometimes crazy people, mental institutions. Biden has no response to that. Didn't even bother to defend. At no point in that debate did Biden try to defend his open borders case. And, of course, Trump hammered him away. I mean, this is a 70 to 80% polling issue for Trump. And for Biden and his useful idiot Mayorkas, they have nothing to say. They have no defense. So, again, I think Trump did a terrific job. So I don't know what Biden's health problems is. Okay, I'm not a doctor. He looks bad, looked awful. Did he have a cold? I don't know. Does he have dementia, cognitive? I don't know. It's not my job. What I will say is this. In the last 2 years of his presidential campaign, Trump has emphasized bread and butter issues of economic prosperity, higher take-home pay for working folks of all stripes, blacks, browns, Asians, women, young. He's emphasized closing the border, restoring public safety, and returning to an America First, peace through strength foreign policy. This is an optimistic, mainstream, common sense platform that is going to carry him back to the White House. You wait and see, folks. You wait and see. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. We're back. So I just want to make the point, I think I made it, using the actual debate quotes, how good a night how good a night Donald Trump had. And, going into this, it's a funny thing that everybody was expecting Trump. Everybody, I'm speaking here, everybody, the liberal media, not all the media. I mean, not Fox, not Newsmax, not some of the conservative outlets. I assume not many hosts on this network, WABC. But the point is, they thought that Biden and Biden's people thought he could razzle, frazzle, insult Trump, and Trump would blow up. Never happened. Trump's too smart. Trump's been through this so many times. He's debated many, many times. And I might add all the talk about how the CNN moderators were going to make it 3-1. Fact is, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash did a very good professional job. Very good. I'm not a fan of Ms. Dana Bash. If she hears this, I hope she understands it's not personal, but I've had a lot of run-ins with her, and I've watched her, and I'm not a fan of hers. Jake Tapper, I don't know. Jake has said things down through the years that probably shouldn't have said, but we all have. I know Jake very well, and I think he's a professional. And I think they both acted professionally. So I want to take that off the table. Good job to those two. If you hear this, I'm not trying to curry favor, but I'm just saying he did a good job. I mean, I've done their Sunday shows on CNN when I was in the White House many, many times. All right. People thought Trump would blow up. People thought he'd lose his cool. He didn't. He was calm. He was moderate. He was like a CEO. It was Biden who blew up, and it was Biden who folded, and it was Biden who looked awful and couldn't complete a sentence. Literally, happened many times. I'm not making this stuff up. Just go through the transcript. You'll see it, or rework the whole tape. You'll see it. And I think again, Mr. Trump going into this debate has said so many times, the best revenge is success. The theme he was spinning for quite some time now, many months, and so were his surrogates, people like Doug Burgum, for example, or Vivek Ramaswamy. Success and successful policies create unity. And Trump stayed with that theme. He's going to do a better job. Why? Just look at how well he performed in his first term. That's the evidence. And it all came through in this debate. Trump's performance was superb, and I think he expanded his base. We will be back with Concha and Webb on the other side.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Much more on the Biden-Trump debate. So what did I see? I think Bill Maher, I saw something about Bill Maher said it was like a Mike Tyson knockout in the first round. Whoa. I thought it was a TKO, maybe around the 7th or 8th round. But we've got Joe Concha, Fox News contributor, and I'm going to do it like I always do, author of, come on, man, The Truth About Biden's No Good, Horrible, Very Bad Presidency, even though Mr. Concha is writing a new book. The old title is just way too much fun. And my pal David Webb, Fox News contributor, Sirius XM talk show host extraordinaire. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on set last night. Thank you for coming on this morning. I'm most grateful. Joe, I guess I'll begin with you. You're the media honcho. Front page of the Wall Street Journal, defiant president pushes on as allies discuss replacement. I don't know what. The New York Times says drop out. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton said stay in. You just had kind of a bad night, like Aaron Judge might have struck out a couple times. And polls are showing 60% of independents wanting to drop out, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, start us out, Joe. You know more about this than I do.
Well, it's all over the place, right? The party brokers, as you mentioned, they're saying stay in, Joe, because I don't know legally, Larry, if they even could get another candidate on the ballot because, state by states, they have all these different rules. So, maybe Clinton and Obama are smart enough to say he's got to stay because we have no other option. We might not be able to get somebody in. And plus, I hear a lot about Gavin Newsom, right? And I just don't think that's a good option at all. I mean, when you get past the Colgate and the gel and the hairspray, you got this thing called a record, right?
Gavin's a loser. He's a loser. Oh, you're right. He's a loser.
He's not so much a loser. He's an elitist, and he's a snob. Oh. And Joe Biden, one of his, strengths, or at least before he became whatever version we saw on Thursday night, is that he can connect with people in the Midwest, right? He's Scranton Joe, and he plays that role pretty well, especially with the unions. But then you think of Gavin Newsom, you think he's going to be able to connect with, blue-collar workers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, places like Georgia. You think he's going to do well, or Arizona? I don't see it. So between that and, highest tax rate in the country, highest homeless rate in the country, highest poverty rate in the country, the fact that more people are leaving California than any other state in the country for places like Florida, Tennessee, and Texas, I think you put Gavin in there, and that's a big, big mistake. But overall, just getting back to the media angle here for a moment, when the New York Times says it's time to drop out, that's a huge sign. But if Biden stays in, you never guess who they're going to endorse. Joe Biden, right? So,
yes.
Because they've endorsed every Republican presidential candidate going back to 1956. That means they endorsed Mondale. He's the guy who won one state. Right. So the New York Times can say this now, but in the end, I think Joe is the guy going forward because ultimately he's the one who has to step aside. And I don't think he wants to be known as the first president ever to do that because his party told him to. LBJ dropped out because of Vietnam and his health problems, but here it would be like Joe was told to go and he obeyed. He doesn't look like the type of guy who likes to obey in these situations. He's a narcissist, and obviously he probably likes the job.
David Webb.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. By the way, David, thank you for coming on. David, it's on the TV show last night. We had Kevin McCarthy, former speaker, who made a good point. It's and Joe referred to it. It's awful hard to replace. Now, that's because they have rule changes. The Democratic National Committee, DNC, think of it as the convention, but they have to vote for a candidate, for Biden presumably, before August 7th because of an Ohio ballot problem. Okay, Ohio changed its rules, and if they don't get it done by August 7th, they will lose Ohio's votes and electoral votes. Okay, now I don't know the technical aspects of that, but it goes back to this Ohio rule change. So in other words, David, at the convention, you could have an open convention, but you wouldn't have Ohio in there. I think that's part of it, and I think it might penalize the electoral votes. But anyway, it's not easy to get rid of it. If you've got Republicans who want to, I saw Speaker Mike Johnson says, well, we got to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would replace the president for health or mental or incapacitation reasons. They could do that by calling a cabinet meeting, and if a cabinet member raises his hand or her hand and says, you got to go, Joe, they'll vote on it. So it could happen, but that is not going to happen in Biden's cabinet. So, David Webb, where does that leave us? Where do you see this?
You're hitting two of my favorite and I think most important points, and that's why they are my favorite in this whole process. Democrats can't afford to lose any state's electoral votes for Joe Biden. And if they even can get past state rules, which the Biden campaign and the DNC changed, they made changes to how it works, kind of like Harry Reid in the supermajority rule. And eventually, if you look ahead, it ended up biting him in the you-know-what. So that's important. That's an important point. Second, look, there's a committee running the White House right now, whether it's the Susan Rices, the various leftover Clintonians, Obamites, whoever it is. Joe Biden's not fully in charge, and presidents have advisors, but he's not in charge. So not much would change by keeping him on the ballot. When you add those things and other elements together, and my warning to the Republicans on this is strategy over punditry and the sound of your own voice. Look, with all due respect to Chip Roy, someone I've interviewed many times, the idea that if you remove the weakened and weaker opponent, they're not going to write a new story and have a shot at it is bad strategy. Biden in place, beat him. The committee will still be there, but the committee will be gone if you beat him. And therefore, the Republicans can do the reset. And you were there for the reset for the Republican Party under Donald Trump round one. And that's important for the long-term strategy of the country. So we have to think strategically rather than the sound of, as I put it, your own voice as a politician or some pundit or some consultant. There's a longer-term need for the country to recover. We need the pro-growth policies. I think you know a thing or two about that, and all the other things that are needed to get this country back on track.
Well, I think, on that point, David, and Joe, you'll weigh in on it too, but come back to David. On that point, I agreed. First of all, the Chip Roy, Republicans should not be telling Democrats or the Biden cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment. That's just silly. It looks silly. And by the way, it is silly because it ain't going to happen. There's no chance that process is going to happen. So you're 100% right. It's like stand up and be, put your big boy pants on. Stop fiddling around like a kid. Second point, here's Trump on message, all right? I want to get you both on this, but we talked briefly about it last night on the TV. He's on message on the economy, on deregulation, on tax cuts, okay, on energy, on message on the border, on message on crime, frankly, on message on abortion. But he was going to, I look at the economy and the border / crime as meat and potatoes. Joe Biden has essentially no defense against those issues. They're like 70, 80% issues. And, David Webb, I think that's exactly what the GOP should chorus those points. Stop wandering off about the 25th Amendment. Hold to those messages. Nationalize those messages. Leadership, surrogates, everybody. This is a mistake they made in 2022. They didn't have a nationalized message. To some extent, we all made this mistake in 2020. But I'm just saying right now, with the unified party behind Trump, just go and look at the transcript of this debate. Trump's performance was superb. He made a few, embellished a few points, but that's the way life works in politics. But basically, his performance on the issues worked. Biden didn't have a response. That's one of the reasons he bumbled around so much. And that's my response, David Webb. Stay on message, GOP, exclamation point.
When your message and your issues not just coincide, but actually line up almost perfectly on economy, on national security, even on foreign policy, which is typically not a lot of Americans' first point on general elections, and on other issues. When you look at all those things and they align, then the Republicans need to get in line together, like the Reagan rule. If you have some disagreements, put them aside. Your 80% friend is not your 20% enemy. And the people are there with you. And I said it last night, Larry, the goal of a debate is to reach beyond the base.
Right.
And Trump did that. And when the Republicans have the ability to reach beyond the Republican base, based on those issues being aligned, the things we're talking about, use that to win the election, and not just the presidential, but you have a better opportunity down the ballot. And there are a lot of other key races, local races, because that's where your next leadership comes from, most likely. That's what's needed, and they need to think strategically.
That's a great point. Joe Concha, I want to hear you on this. I got to take a break, okay? Please stay where you are. We'll come right back to this issue. Reach beyond your base with the right message, as Dave Webb laid it out. And I think Trump did a lot of good on those points. But got to take a break. We'll come back. Folks, I'm Kudlow. We got the best of the best, Joe Concha and David Webb. We'll be right back.
Larry Kudlow. From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. We're talking to Joe Concha, Fox News contributor, and David Webb, Fox News contributor and Sirius XM talk show host. Joe, the question before the House, before the break, with Mr. Trump on message, I thought in the debate Thursday night, key bread and butter issues such as the border and the economy. Did he reach beyond his base And isn't that where the GOP should be going instead of these sort of fanciful 25th Amendment or this or that, or get rid of Joe Biden? What do you think, Joe?
Go for the kill shot, quite frankly, Larry. Make this an election where Joe Biden suddenly has to visit New Jersey. Poll out yesterday.
Right.
Trump up in New Jersey now. He's either tied or up in Minnesota, hasn't gone red since 72. He's tied or up in Virginia, hasn't gone red since 2004. Tied or up in places like New Hampshire, Maine, and Joe Biden isn't nimble enough to defend all these states. Oh, by the way, while he's trailing in North Carolina and Georgia and Nevada and Arizona and Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. So, yeah, at this point, Trump, you got all the momentum on your side. You have your base. They're never going anywhere. He wasn't joking, really, when he said he could go out to Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, they'd stay with him, right? Yeah. He gets convicted, and his numbers only go up. And going back to a point you made earlier, enough of this 25th Amendment BS, right? People don't like trying to do the outside stuff to take a candidate out, right? They didn't like it with the Trump trials, obviously. And if we do 25th Amendment or impeachment, no one wants this stuff. Just have it come down to November 5th at the ballot box and people asking the simple question, were you better off under Trump or Biden? And that's what's going to bring in independence. That's something Trump should be saying every time. And I'll make one more point before we go to David. At the Wildwood rally that I went to, Trump was very he made a great point, and I hadn't heard him make it before. He said, you know what, I'm more powerful and I'm more popular than I was in 2016 or 2020, because then you had to think about what the alternative was. Now you know what it is. People got a taste of it, and they don't like it.
That is a good point. Can I just ask, did you say, New Hampshire? You also said Maine? Really? Maine?
Yeah, Maine.
I love that.
Believe it.
I love that. Maine.
Why not? If New Hampshire, why not Maine?
Well,
right?
I saw the numbers in New Jersey. I saw that poll. Was Trump ahead? I think it was either even or he was ahead.
He's up a point, yeah. I believe it. I was at that rally. I don't see any Biden signs around my neighborhood.
David,
I'm in a kind of like 50-50 town.
David Webb, is Trump going to carry New York?
Well, here's a really important point. And Joe nailed it. Make him play defense.
Yeah.
But let's say Trump doesn't carry New York, to your question, Larry, and he doesn't carry the state of New York for the presidential. Down ballot, there's a need to push. New Yorkers have elected Republican governors before. Mm-hmm. Upstate New York, out of the whole, unfortunately, that is one of our favorite city, the greatest in the nation, Manhattan, New York City, Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, all of this. If he can put that pressure on, they're playing defense and we're winning.
You guys want to swing?
Sorry, I think Joe's coaching a baseball team.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No, I'm coaching my son at golf. He's 8, and he's going to be the next Tiger Woods. Go ahead, take it away, guys.
Sorry, David.
Can he take on Joe Biden?
He's going to run. He's going to run. He's going to run for the Senate in New Jersey. Now, David, you were saying, please.
Well, my point being the downward pressure from the presidential on down is really important. When they have to defend in all these areas, and I love Maine vacation land, so I'm with Joe on that. New Hampshire, one of my favorite states, the Granite State. But in New York, Trump can help Republicans also begin to turn the state around.
Yes.
And that's important. This is not just a presidential election. This is a United States general election to put us on the right track. So the Republicans, let the Democrats have their Joe Biden and let them run for all the issues and things we've talked about, but focus on playing your game better and winning up and down the ballot, because we've got a lot of work to do to get us back on track economically. We've got to get those pro-growth policies back, tax policy back. We've got to unleash American energy. And we're not going to do that if we're constantly fighting the Democrats at every level of government.
No, stay with the message. The message has evolved into a very good, powerful message. Unlike 22, this is the border and the economy, okay? The border and the economy. I mean, you saw Trump Thursday night. Trump brought, particularly he brought almost everything that Biden said Trump brought back to the border, which is, again, it's an 80% issue. And it leads into the whole, crime and public safety concerns. It's a nationalized issue. It's not a border issue, right? It's a nationalized issue. just like inflation and falling real wages. Nationalized issue. Or, put another way, it's issues that create a working class coalition. Whoever said it earlier at the top, Joe, or one of you gentlemen said, I think it was Joe, Gavin Newsom's an elitist. They can't go there. Now, Joe Biden may not be an elitist per se, but his party is elite. They don't care about working folks. That's the whole issue of EVs and climate and, change your appliances and cost a fortune for new electricity in your home. They don't understand working folks can't afford it. It's phenomenal stuff. And the other thing I'm hearing, David Webb, you know what you're saying? Trump will have coattails. We haven't had a Republican with coattails in I don't know how long. Maybe back to Reagan. Trump could have real coattails, as you say, for the down ballot, for Senate seats, for House seats. Wow. Think about New York State, right? In upstate New York, Westchester County and elsewhere, there's 4 congressional seats that we picked up in 2022. Everybody was worried about losing them. Gives those guys a shot. They might be able to do very well, those 4. And we may see California. Kevin McCarthy was so good picking up House seats in California, we may see more. Think about that. Joe Concha, coattails. The first time in ages a GOP candidate can do that.
Well, absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, people forget, like, the Senate is completely winnable at this point. I mean, You got Montana. Yep. How do you not win Montana if Trump's up 20 points, right? I know there's some people that may jump to the incumbent, but not that many. 20 points worth? No way. And then we talk about also Ohio as well. That's in play. West Virginia's done because obviously Manchin is running. He wasn't going to win against Justice anyway. But then you have races in places like Arizona, Maryland, I think is very much up for grabs. And I know people yell, Larry Hogan, he's a rhino. All right, because he's criticized Trump doesn't make him a rhino necessarily. And besides, he's going to vote with Trump 95, 98% of the time. So, yeah, that's what Trump needs to get everything he wants to get done if he's elected, when he's elected. And that's to have a Senate behind him and a House behind him. Now, he had that in 2017, remember, but that was a party working against him and not really with him on things like the border. So I think this time around, Speaker Johnson and even McConnell will give Trump what he wants because they know that, that it's not in their best interest to oppose him at this point, given the power that he has.
I like that a lot. David Webb, what happens from here? Post-debate, Trump's going to keep hustling, right? I don't know what they're going to do with Biden. I know he's in North Carolina. I expect them to try to hide Biden. With the Democrats are still going to be split about whether they think Biden should stay in or not. That's going to be the fun. In other words, I don't think this debate catastrophe for Biden is going to go away. Republicans should lay off that. Okay, let the circular firing squad hit for the Democrats. But the Democrats are going to have a circulating fire squad, aren't they?
Yeah, look, let them have their circular firing squad. Let the Joe Scarboroughs and the Mika Brzezinskis lose their mind, the ladies on The View. Joe Biden just virtue signals that, he goes to a Waffle House after the debate because every Georgian only goes to a Waffle House. They have no other play. Let them keep doing this because the American people, and all 3 of us are hitting on this, and I hope people are paying close attention.
All right.
Your issues now align. Focus on what's important to you. Vote your interest. Okay. Again, reach beyond the base. Look, Republicans and Democrats are paying the same increased price of 100% for eggs. You're paying 40% more for certain groceries, 25% more, your food and fuel. That's not a pricing structure for Republicans and one for Democrats.
All right.
This is a structure for all Americans.
I got it, Joe.
So focus and fight better.
David Webb, Sirius XM Talk Show, Fox News. Joe Concha, Fox News. I'm Kudlow. Terrific stuff, fellas. On the other side of the break, the great Kevin Hassett's going to talk about the economic side of this debate and what lies ahead. I'm Kudlow. Stay with us.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Larry Kudlow. Let's go right to Kevin Hassett, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors during the Trump administration, distinguished visiting fellow at Hoover Institution, and author of the great book, The Drift, Stopping America's Slide to Socialism. Kevin, welcome back. Thanks, buddy.
It's great to be here, Larry. Yeah.
And so give me a quick, I thought Trump was on message for the economy during that debate. I thought he did pretty well. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought so too. You know, a few of us went down and met with him a few weeks before and just had a conversation about everything that's going on, both in Biden's economy and in Trump's economy. And honest to goodness, he didn't need any prep at all. You know what I mean? I mean, he's just like he lives and breathes American politics now and the economy. And so I thought that he was on point throughout the debate. And you know, one of the things that bugs me is that everybody now who are sort of excusing the terrible performance of Joe Biden, one of the things they keep saying is that Trump was lying.
Yes.
But he didn't.
Right.
You know, if you're going to say that, then tell me what do you think he said that was incorrect. But as far as I, went through and I was keeping track of the economic assertions that he made, everyone was correct.
The Wall Street Journal article in the paper today, it was online last night, was just terrible. Terrible by Vivian Salamis and the others. I'm going to call. I know them all well. I'm going to call them and yell at them before the weekend's over. You're exactly right. Yes, you were right. They shouldn't have said that. You know, it's cool. One thing, he snuck in. He snuck in the stock market. And one of his answers, he said the stock market by the end of the COVID or by the end of 2020 was actually higher than it was before. I love that. Because he always talked about the stock market with us. I mean, and you walk in there, you go, "What's the market doing and why?" He put that in there, which was very cool. But you know what? He didn't mention the no tip tax. He didn't mention that.
He's very serious about that one, though. Yeah, I've spoken with him about it. He's very serious.
I know. Me too.
That policy is going to be in there, And the other thing that you could do, by the way, if you're thinking about it as a comprehensive policy, do you remember like the 85,000 IRS agents that the IRS hired? They were mostly going after people with tips.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? Because the idea is that they thought that there's all this fraud from people who are, tip workers. And so I think President Trump's plan is going to be to get those 85,000 IRS agents a new job somewhere, or not at all.
Yes,
and not tax tips, and so it's really going to be a huge relief.
I know. I think he should use it in the next debate. I mean, it's a really powerful.
We scratched out the number. Like I haven't done an official score of it yet, but it's only about $4 billion a year.
Oh, so that's the whole thing, guys.
Yeah,
and it causes angst. It causes angst and things.
Yeah,
I know.
No, I don't quote me on that number yet. We've got like the Matt Jensens of the world out there are going to work this out for us. But yeah, I think it looks like a very small number.
I think he made the case on taxes and regulations. He did a beautiful job, and Joe Biden had nothing to say. I mean, what's he going to say about that? The numbers are on Trump's side. If Kevin, if you polished up for the next debate, what would you suggest? What should he add?
Well, I thought that what he did here is something which is the main emphasis of his was to just let Joe Biden talk.
Yeah.
Like he really wanted to make sure that Joe Biden had a chance to talk, and not that he wasn't going to stand up for what he believes in and so on, but it was a debate where Joe Biden had a chance to demonstrate that he's capable of doing the job. Frankly, if you and I were there, I think we'd be talking 25th Amendment. If you look at how bad he is, This is a guy who, forget about the election, Larry. This guy has to be the commander in chief should China invade Taiwan tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Doesn't that fill you with anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously. And I got to say that they had these 16 people. They had the list of their names that were preparing him at Camp David for a week. Those people, honest to God, they should be finished in American politics because they've been lying to the American people in a way that really threatens the security of our country. So think about it. You can't spend a week prepping the guy that we just saw on stage and not realize that he's not competent to do the job.
Where did they publish? I didn't know that. The names were published? Some of them I saw.
They had all 16 names in one of those, like the Wall Street Journal or one place online today.
Wow.
And I'm just saying that if you're a listener, you should look at those names and you should remember never to trust those people ever again.
Kevin,
like the 51 CIA agents said that the laptop is folks.
Kevin, GDP now tracker from the Atlanta Fed is down to 2.2 for the second quarter, which will end in a couple days. So the first quarter was 1.4. It looks pretty slumpy to me, and the durable goods order was terrible. Retail sales looking pretty soft. Housing is just crashing left and right. What are you thinking here on the economy?
I think that we are slogging around in the sort of 1% range, and I think that that is about what we've expected. So there was a time last year where the economy was surprising you and me on the upside. Mm-hmm. But I think right now, if we were in the White House going over the numbers again, we say, yeah, that's about what we expected. The thing that's a little lower than I expected is inflation. Mm-hmm. Like the PCE came in at 0, and that was a little bit below what I expect because wage inflation has been still pretty high because that comes with a lag. And so what it means is, at least for a moment now, that real wages are actually increasing finally for workers a little bit. And so that's a little bit of good news.
Not for the whole term, but recently.
Oh, just recently. That's right. Real wages are down for the whole term. Absolutely.
I'm looking at the Cleveland Fed inflation nowcasting. So what they're saying for the second quarter, Kevin, is the CPI will be 3% annually for the second quarter. The core will be 3.5%, and the PCE consumption deflator 2.5%.
And 2.6 or something was what I had, yeah.
And the core 2.81. So they're still above target. I mean, I still don't see any rush to cut rates. What do you think?
No, there wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. They won't cut rates before the election. It would be preposterous for them to do it. But the point is that I think that the higher for longer strategy seems like it's working pretty well. That inflation is headed down, projecting in the right direction, and the Fed, I think, you and I talked about this on TV, and I said the only way the Fed cuts rates this year is if they've been taken over by Democrats. And, thank goodness they didn't, right? They were data dependent. I thought they were going to juice the economy for Joe Biden. The economy is softening, which is not good for Joe Biden, but it is getting inflation under control. So the Fed has, tipped our cap to them. They've been doing their job about right. It's been about data dependent, which means they're not going to cut rates this year because, unless there's a really, really radical change and we're not growing in the 1 to 2 range, but going negative, then they're not going to cut rates.
What do you think about the Fed makeup? I by the way, think you should run the Fed in the next administration. Now, I penciled you in for Treasury or Fed. You do a brilliant job, either one, not just because you're a pal of mine, but because you're a brilliant guy. But the Fed, I think the Fed staff is peopled by Democrats, right? I mean, that's...
Oh, for sure. It was 98%. Right. There was one survey, 98% of the economists at the Fed are Democrats.
Right. But somehow they've come out of this reasonably well.
They have.
Despite their biases.
Yes, that's right. Despite their biases, that you have to say because again, don't forget at the start of the year when you and I were wondering whether they had become a partisan organization, that the market was saying they're going to cut rates 6 times this year, even though inflation was still close to 4. And that made no sense. Right. And they were kind of signaling that, too. And I kind of wonder if the fact that you and I discussed like the partisan implications of them cutting with the data like that didn't, in fact, have an impact.
I think it helped. I think that's a good point. Malpass pitched in. Laffer pitched in. I think you're right about that. They're listening. And they came out of this thing pretty good. Anyway, we're running out of time. Kevin, glad you're back on it. And keep it up, buddy. Keep it up. Yep. Give Trump all the best advice. Guy's on a roll right now. Guy's on a tear.
But he doesn't need us.
Actually, I know. Isn't that the truth? I love that story. Folks, Kevin Hassett, his book is The Drift, Stopping America's Slide to Socialism. You ought to read it. One click on Amazon or wherever. It's a very important book. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, Greg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst. Supreme Court came out with 2 very important cases yesterday with bearing on the election and the economy. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. We're going to bring in our legal beagle because the Supreme Court made some very important decisions yesterday. Greg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst, and his latest book is The Constitution of the United States and Other Patriotic Documents. Greg Jarrett, welcome. Greg, Jared, I miss you. I have not seen you.
Well, I'm here and ready and available for you anytime.
All right. Well, you're the best of the best. So let's look at this. You got two big decisions. You got the so-called Enron decision, and then you've got the Chevron deference decision. Can we start with the Enron decision, Greg? Walk us through that.
Well, this is another example of the United States Supreme Court having to fix the sophomoric mistakes of rogue prosecutors at the DOJ and under Merrick Garland and Joe Biden. They have consistently misused and contorted the law. They do it for political purposes. And then, of course, they get spanked by the Supreme Court. In this case, they were bringing improper charges against 330 some odd people for their actions on January 6th. They tried to force fit this obstruction statute derived from the Enron debacle. But, I mean, all you have to do, Larry, is read the statute. It's about corrupting evidence and tampering with documents. Well, that's not what happened on January 6th. And so the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. And that now means that 300 plus people who were falsely prosecuted may have their convictions either tossed or modified. For Donald Trump, of course, it means Jack Smith may have to rewrite his indictment to circumvent his way around the Supreme Court, which I think he'll do. Understand that there are 4 charges in the J6 case against Trump, and 2 of those charges, half of his case, was essentially gutted by the Supreme Court yesterday. Of course, we're still waiting for the big kahuna, which is on Monday. The Supreme Court will decide immunity for presidents.
Greg, if he rewrites the charges, so the Enron decision takes out 2 of the 4 charges. If he rewrites the charges, does that postpone the whole J6 process?
It does. And look, even if he doesn't rewrite it with a superseding indictment and tries to claim, well, there was some document manipulation and false, elector certificates filed, that falls under, the obstruction statute. That'll have to be litigated, Larry. That's going to take weeks, if not months. I mean, and plus, I do think the Supreme Court on Monday will extend the civil immunity to criminal protection for all presidents, and that will further delay it. In my mind, there's no way that Jack Smith can get his case before a jury prior to the election.
Yes. Very important, extremely important stuff politically, because all that stuff's the lawfare stuff, so that's fading away. The other one, of course, finally, the Supremes took more power away from all this, the regulators, the administrative state, the regulatory state, the fourth branch of government. This is the Chevron deference issue. Give us a couple of morsels on that one.
Well, the Chevron case was one in a string of wrongful, mind-boggling decisions by the liberal Burger Court in the 1980s, which also included Roe versus Wade. The Supreme Court finally said, you know what? Those justices back then, 40-some-odd years ago, got it all wrong. Because the Chevron decision told judges, you have to defer to various federal regulatory agencies' interpretations of vague laws. Well, agencies aren't capable of that. They're not lawyers, most of them. And so, that Chevron decision has been tossed out. That wrongful decision so many years ago is one of the reasons why we have this bloated bureaucracy today, all powerful, unelected, administrative agencies who tell small businesses, medium and large businesses what to do, how to do it. And the increased cost gets passed on to consumers, which contributed immensely to higher expenses and inflation for consumers for the last 4 decades. And every year it got worse and worse and worse.
And throwing a wet blanket over the economy, particularly the smaller business economy, with these little businesses can't afford high-priced lawyers to fight the regulators.
Right.
And so it's a very important economic decision. And it goes, Greg, it goes along with the court which ruled on West Virginia versus EPA. They ruled in favor of West Virginia. So that was one that pinned the regulatory ears back in the EPA. This one's even broader, right? Pins back all the regulators.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I think it affects every federal regulatory agencies. And, Larry, you need a calculator to keep track of the number of them. They keep growing by leaps and bounds every year. It happened under Obama. Trump, as you know, because you were there, pulled back the regulations to the great relief of consumers and businesses across America. And then, of course, Joe Biden reversed it, and the regulatory state became even more abusive and expensively onerous.
Yes, and Trump was proud of that in the debate. Rightly so. Rightly so. Put it right out there. There's nothing Biden can say about it. Because the regulatory state, Newt Gingrich several years ago called it big government socialism. Those guys, and Steve Forbes railed on about it. Those guys are like a fourth branch of government, and that is very bad. There's no constitution for that.
Talk about fascism and authoritarianism. That's what the liberal courts created 4 decades ago, and people like Joe Biden want more of it. Mm-hmm. It's sort of the Marxist socialist state of the government, just like the Soviet Union, micromanaging everything that everyone does. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. It's so harmful.
100%. Greg Jarrett, thank you very much. Folks, go and buy Greg's book, The Constitution of the United States and Other Patriotic Documents. It's a great read. Fox News legal analyst. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Talk soon. Get you back on the TV show. Folks, take a break. And then the great Kellyanne Conway, the smartest political advisor. She'll be here to talk about the debates and many other things. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. We bring in the great Kellyanne Conway, former Trump senior counselor and campaign manager in the Trump-Pence campaign in 2016. And her book is Here's the Deal, a memoir. And she's one of my dearest friends, and she's the smartest political person I know. Thanks, Kellyanne, for doing this. We appreciate it, kiddo. And let me just start with this. So I'm now seeing, after the liberal media gets through bashing Joe Biden and the New York Times wants him to resign and stuff, now I see today they're basically arguing, well, wait a minute, Trump didn't win the debate. It was just that Biden lost it. Trump didn't win the debate. I don't happen to agree with that. And we had a TV show last night talking about it, and radio this morning. What do you think? Trump didn't win the debate? Really?
Larry, thanks for having me. Option C, both of the above. Joe Biden lost the debate, and Donald Trump won the debate.
Right.
And those are two different things. And they're trying to do this. The entire prism through the mainstream media and their pals, their acolytes and sycophants in the Biden orbit has been they look at everything through the prism of Donald Trump. Now they want us to look at everything through the prism of Joe Biden, which many of us have been doing for a while. Does he deserve 4 more years? Of course not. And they're saying, well, the issue is really Biden. He had a bad night. Everybody has a bad debate performance. But Trump lied, and Trump's not up to the job, and Trump reminded independents and swing voters why they don't like him in the first place. None of that is true, Larry. It's not true in the snap polls. It's not true in what had been the best polling week for Donald Trump with the media polls to date. He has his highest favorability rating in Gallup. Joe Biden has his lowest going into that debate. Donald Trump is beating him among likely voters, not the, quote, low information voters that the media likes to castigate and denigrate and ridicule. among likely voters. He's beating him for the first time in Quinnipiac and in the New York Times polls. So they know they've got trouble, but guess what? Too little, too late. Many of us have been saying for years that the difference in this election is, will you believe what they say to you or what you see with your own two eyes? And all of those who have been gaslighting and lying to us about behind the scenes, Joe Biden is a triathlete. He's a trapeze artist. You should see him doing cartwheels. It's just not true. Stop lying to us. And Larry, may I say one more thing? They couldn't replace him with anybody who's any better. Maybe someone who can string a sentence together, clearly not as Vice President Kamala, but maybe somebody who can string a sentence together, maybe somebody who's a better debater. But that person's going to be a socialist. That person's not going to be a free market growthier capitalist. That person's not going to say, let's do a dereg agenda. Let's keep the Trump tax cuts going. They're not going to say, let's get Iran on the run again. Let's secure the border. So they're all the same, just maybe different calibers of debate performance. And the New York Times, Larry, I want your listeners to pull up a ridiculous puff piece by someone named Katie Rogers the week before the debate. It had nothing negative in it at all about Joe Biden. It talked about how the 30 people puffing and stuffing, juicing and goosing him, filling his head with these canned lines that didn't work out anyway, how they're eating lasagna. And there's great camaraderie at Camp David. Complete puff piece. And then the New York Times turns around and says, Joe must go.
Oh, my God. I'm going to find that piece. I missed that one. I'm not a regular daily reader of the New York Times, but I'll go and find that piece. That's wonderful. Kellyanne, though, let's go back. You're right. Biden lost, Trump won. Now, from the debate, from Mr. Trump's standpoint, you have a great ear for this music. What stood out in terms of Trump won the debate? What stood out in your mind for his victory in the debate? What points?
Several things. He was very good about defending himself against these ridiculous shop-worn sound bites and left-wing tropes about suckers and losers at the cemetery. He's right. 19 people have debunked that. I've never heard him say anything even close to that. As somebody who had veterans and military in her portfolio and traveled with him, et cetera, including to D-Day for the 75th anniversary and the state visit in UK. He defended himself. He attacked. I think he was very good, basically making Joe Biden eat and own what Biden had done at the scene of the crime. The last presidential debate, where he said, where they were together, where he lied about the 51 so-called national intelligence officers, where he lied about talking with his son about business deals, where he lied to the American people on from that debate stage, Larry, about the authenticity of Hunter Biden's laptop. So I thought Trump's strongest points were when he was talking policy. We had the best economy, particularly pre-COVID, and then he didn't shy away from the way he handled COVID. Operation Warp Speed saved millions of lives in this country and across the world, and he shouldn't shy away from that. It's the vaccine mandates that bother people, not the availability of the vaccine. And the fact that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris themselves were 2 of 12 million Americans who got that vaccine while Donald Trump was still president. I liked when he talked about growth. I liked when he talked about putting Iran on defense. I liked when he talked about that we're at 2 new wars, the porous border, the bad economy, the price of everything is up. So when Donald Trump talks policy, he's winning. And look, he defended himself without seeming overly defensive. And my favorite part was Donald Trump actually just hanging back and letting Joe Biden speak. We got to see Joe Biden in full, not these ridiculous, quote, deep video fakes. We got him raw and uncut. Everybody got to see it. The only thing I can't believe is that everybody is clutching their pearls and thinks that that's the first time Joe Biden has ever been that way. The senior Democrats, the mainstream media, Biden's own family, Larry, if they really cared about this country, they would have him step aside 18 months ago, and he would have taken Kamala with him. If Donald Trump is this true existential threat to democracy, why do you insist on running against him, a guy who's losing to him in the national media polls and in every swing state, and biting into core Democratic constituencies, union households, suburban men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and young people? President Trump is doing better among them than any Republican presidential candidate ever has, and he doesn't need to win 50% of any of the groups I just said to you to become the next president.
You know, he stayed with the idea that success is the best revenge.
Yes.
The word retribution came up. He said, no, success is my answer to that. And he stayed with the bread and butter the bread and butter issues, inflation, economy, border. And he returned to them constantly, and especially the border. The border, the crime, the lack of public safety. He just kept hammering away. I mean, that was a very good debate strategy. Just keep staying with your meat and potatoes, because Biden was tongue-tied or brain-tied or whatever, but he couldn't answer him. He just didn't have an answer because in the real world he had no answer. So I thought that was brilliant.
He had no answer. It was a great strategy. And you know how Donald Trump prepared for that debate? We all see it. It's right in front of us. He does these rallies. He goes on television and radio interviews. He does the podcast. He's constantly speaking to the American people, Larry. That's the best way to prepare, is to be the insurgent incumbent. You've got that 4-year record as president that you can explain to people, remind them why they miss your record and you, and overlay it with this hunger, this swagger, this front-facing, public-facing Donald Trump, where he's not getting rest and rehearsal for 7 days. He's out there. And by the way, Hillary Clinton she committed the same error in 2016. If you go back, she took 5 days off. And Trump occasionally, before the debate, Trump occasionally would say, I think they're pumping her with oxygen. I think Hillary's resting. But guess where he would joke about it? In TV interviews, on radio, and in his rallies. She left the bully pulpit to us all for ourselves. And there's Trump with all the media attention, taking the case directly to the people. That's what presidents are supposed to do. In 2024, Larry, when we suffer from information overload in so many ways, many Americans feel like they suffer from information underload when it comes to our presidential candidates. And there is Donald Trump. The way he prepared was fundamentally different. He's just out there talking to folks. I want to say one more thing. Abortion. This cost some seats in 2022 because our candidates had marbles in their mouths. They don't know how to talk about it. Donald Trump basically neutralized that on the debate stage. He went back to what he did against Hillary, and Joe Biden had no defense whatsoever.
Yes, I made this point. Kellyanne, I made this point on TV last night and this morning. The partial birth abortion, which nobody wants, he nailed Hillary with it, and he nailed Biden with it. You are so right. And that's what they want. That's what Democrats want. Nobody in the country wants it. No, it's an extremist. God, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm so excited. I love talking to you.
But by the way, Donald Trump gave a roadmap to people who better pay attention and sharpen up. Senate candidates, I'm talking to you. I'm looking at you. They are all. I know these people. Some of them personally. I like them all. I hope they all win. But right now, they're not winning, Larry. They're way behind Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, Montana. I'm looking at you, folks. And it's because I care. I want them to win. But waiting on Donald Trump just to tether himself to you and pull you over the finish line is unfair. Go get your own dog sled. Go get your own entry fee in the Iditarod. You got to do what Donald Trump does. You got to get out there and campaign and connect with the people. I'm concerned about this, Larry, because I want 55, 56 Senate seats, not 51, 52, especially if you think of the gutting the Senate for the VP slot and or the cabinet. Folks, sharpen up. He gave every Republican candidate a roadmap, how to talk about abortion and climate and January 6th and democracy and Trump and convicted felon and all this. And then, of course, on the positive side, led to the most important stuff, growth and the economy and tax cuts and dereg and energy independence and the border.
We need to pick up 25, 35, 40 House seats. Yes. We need that.
Where are they, Larry? Right now, we're not, babe. We're not.
I know. Mike Johnson, who's a nice fellow, he's out there telling about the 25th Amendment. That's all nonsense. You're right. Trump gave a policy message roadmap. You're so right. Guy, I love it. Kellyanne, I just love it. I got to go. You're terrific. I love everything. I'm going to see you on Tuesday. Folks, the great Kellyanne Conway. By the way, her book, Here's the Deal, one click. Here's the Deal, a memoir. It's a great book. All right, take a quick break.
Thank you, Larry.
Is Biden a national security risk? We're going to talk to Ambassador Robert O'Brien. Whoa.
Larry Kudlow. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. We're going to bring in Ambassador Robert O'Brien, my dear friend, former national security advisor in the Trump administration, and now chairman of American Global Strategies. Robert, thank you for this. One thing I want to start with, looking at Mr. Biden the debate Thursday night, such a poor performance, so fragile, couldn't put sentences together. I mean, I don't know what the medical issues are. I'm not smart enough to know, but the guy looked awful. He could barely stand up, barely make sense. Robert, some people are saying if you were Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or the mullahs in Iran or any of our enemies, adversaries, they would take a look at that, and Biden becomes a national security risk. Whoever wins in November, Biden's going to be president for the next 6 months anyway. And what is going to happen? And I wanted you to assess that national security risk. Will our enemies take advantage? Will they try to become adventurous? What do you think of all this?
Well, Larry, thank you for having me on the show. And the debate was really eye-opening. I was really heartbroken for the country to watch President Biden's performance. And I was glad to see President Trump won the debate. He was terrific and witty and funny and great on substance, as you and I both know. And I think the American people got to see with President Trump what we saw in the Oval Office day in, day out in the White House. But for President Biden, I felt terrible for himself and for his family. And going to your point, it's a very dangerous 6 months for America because he's still the commander-in-chief. And if we want President Trump to win the election, he will win the election. The polls look great for him today. But President Biden is still our president. And, our foreign adversaries, Larry, and you know this, they have doctors and psychologists watch these performances. And you can imagine that in Beijing and in Moscow and in Tehran, their best specialists are watching it, and they see a very weak president, someone who's really not in command of the situation. Hopefully Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, and the other advisors are, keeping a steady hand on the tiller. But it's a very dangerous time for America because we look weak, and as you know, weakness is very provocative.
I mean, I'm concerned. I mean, let's take the Middle East. Might Iran do something crazy because they see Biden weakness? He's the commander-in-chief, and he sure didn't look like a commander-in-chief. I mean, actually, it was Trump who looked like the commander-in-chief on that debate. They were side by side. But the reality is we have Mr. Biden, and we have his team. I mean, to me, the biggest hot spot, the biggest risk is the Middle East. I mean, I don't think China's going to invade Taiwan right now, but maybe I'm wrong. You can comment on it. But, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, I don't know. You tell me, Robert O'Brien. But to me, that's the huge risk that they might pull something.
Well, they might, and they could break out to nuclear weapons very quickly. Thank goodness Bibi Netanyahu, your friend and my friend, is in control in Israel. He's a very strong leader and tough guy, and I think the Iranians have to factor Bibi in. So we've got that going for us. But, we don't want to have to outsource our national security and our strength to a foreign leader, even a good friend like Prime Minister Netanyahu. So, of course, the Iranians are looking at this and they're figuring out what they can get away with. The Houthis shooting down or trying to blow up our ships in the Red Sea. We've got Kataib Hezbollah still attacking American soldiers and sailors in Iraq. We've got Hezbollah threatening Israel. So it's a very dangerous time. And going to your point about Taiwan, maybe Xi Jinping will figure this is his best opportunity, his best chance to get Taiwan. But right now they're involved in a low-intensity conflict with the Philippines in the South China Sea. And the Philippines is a treaty ally of the United States of America. So they are a longtime friend of the region. And the Chinese are literally attacking them in their islands, attacking the fishermen, trying to take over their territory in an exclusive economic zone. So, that'll certainly continue because there's nothing about Biden's performance that would suggest strength for America.
Robert, we have a treaty with Philippines. Are we bound to defend them if they're attacked?
We are, and we are bound to defend them, and we've said we will. But again, the question is, would we? And the Chinese are watching President Biden's performance, and it's not just his performance in the debate stage, Larry. It's our weakness across the world. It's our weakness in the face of the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, which you and I talked about before the invasion. We did nothing to stop the invasion. Our weakness in Afghanistan, the catastrophic withdrawal that President Trump talked about in the debate. I mean, so we're doing nothing to deter our adversaries, and that's dangerous for America.
Robert, I just wanted to return. We talked to you about this last week. Your piece, your brilliant piece in Foreign Affairs magazine, prestigious Foreign Affairs magazine, The Return of Peace Through Strength, making the case for Trump's foreign policy. Peace through strength. Did Mr. Trump get that message out, do you think, in the debate?
I thought he was terrific on that front, Larry, and he looked strong. He talked about being respected by our adversaries and being respected by our friends as well. He talked about how he got NATO funding. He talked about how he got Javelin missiles to Ukraine, which saved Ukraine. That was President Trump that saved Ukraine, not President Biden or the Democrats. He talked about, but he went beyond just the military and our armed forces, which he was very supportive of. And he said the members of the armed forces love him, and they do. I've seen that. You've seen it at bases all around the country, around the world, serving Thanksgiving dinner with them in Afghanistan. We went to Bagram. But it's the economic strength, and this is your area, Terry. Decreasing regulation, cutting taxes, making America strong, and that's what will allow us to have a first-class military. We have to be strong economically. We have to put tariffs on the Chinese dumping products on us and protect our industries. Those are the sorts of things that will give us the strength to be able to rebuild our military, and that's your area, and I think you got strong feelings on that, and I think President Trump came across great on the economic front as well as the rebuilding the military and on the foreign policy front.
Yes, he did. You know, it's funny. He was at the Business Roundtable, the CEOs, a couple weeks ago, and I was the interviewer, moderator, and I said to him, you know, Ronald Reagan always argued, if you're strong at home, meaning the economy, you're strong abroad. And I asked him, and he agreed with that. He talked at some length about that, and then he went into tax cuts and deregulation. And I think that's the story. One of the reasons there were no wars breaking out during Trump's administration, in which we served, is we were strong at home, and the world could see that. That plus the fact that we kept oil prices down by producing oil. And I thought I think he could have done more on the energy front in the debate, but just in the last 30 seconds, he was hard on Afghanistan, and I think he was right about that. We would have left with honor. We wouldn't have given up the Bagram Air Force Base, would we?
Never. I mean, that was the way we were going to evacuate American citizens. And I'll tell you one thing, President Trump talked about getting Americans home without paying ransom. As you know, before I was National Security Advisor, I was his hostage envoy. We never paid a dime in ransom. We got our people home. President Trump would have never left Americans behind in Afghanistan. I would have never pulled the military out before we got our civilians home. Fabulous.
Robert O'Brien, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor. Folks, read his article, Foreign Affairs, The Return of Peace Through Strength. I'm Kudlow. Would take a break, do some stock market work on the other side.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Larry Kudlow. Great to be with you. You can live stream us on the internet. LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. Heard all across the country, around the world, throughout the solar system and the Milky Way. And join us during the week. Fox Business Network, FBM. Name of the show's Kudlow, 4 to 5 p.m. every day. And if you can't make it at 4, you can still DVR us. And bringing in my pal John Carney, Breitbart News editor for economics and the co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest, which is a must-read. John, I didn't read it when you were on the air yesterday, but the very interesting article you wrote, Biden's still trapped in his old economic lies. Very interesting article. You're right. That did come out. He's still blaming. He says it's a terrible thing. I had to inherit this awful economy, and that was the source of all evil, in a sense. They right? They just jammed all this spending. But this is a really interesting art. I have to go through the tape of that thing because he did say all this stuff, didn't he?
He did. He came back to this lie he's been telling ever since the campaign, really. In 2020, he insisted that the economy was in ruins when, in fact, we had one negative quarter of growth. Really, by the way, 1 month negative growth. And then we sprung back. Mm-hmm. We grew at an incredible V-shaped recovery, 33% in the third quarter. And then we were bouncing back. The fourth quarter, we had growth. Then the first quarter of 2021, we were growing again. And so this was a lie that he was telling back then. What's astounding is that he's still telling this same lie. Frankly, I actually do think this might be a sign of cognitive decline. He has a long-term memory, as a lot of people do. He remembers the stories he was telling 4 years ago. And he's sticking to that. That's his memory of what happened. It's wrong. It's very wrong. And I'm actually very annoyed at a lot of the coverage of this debate because a lot of it says, well, Biden was old, but Trump told a lot of falsehoods.
Right.
Biden began with a falsehood. The very first question they asked him was about inflation. And he said, oh, well, I inherited an economy that was flat on its back. And that just wasn't true.
What did he say did he acknowledge anything on inflation, that he was given a low inflation rate? I asked that Katie Pavlich mentioned that he did acknowledge that, but I don't recall that.
So what he said was he did say he gave up one of the lies he had been telling recently, which was that he inherited 9% inflation, which obviously was not true. That didn't happen until a year and a half after he had been president. But what he said was the reason why there was no inflation was because there were no jobs and the economy lied in ruins. But of course, that was not true. And as you said, this was the origin of everything bad that happened, because it was the lie that the economy was in ruin that allowed them to get away with passing a $2 trillion stimulus plan when the economy did not need anywhere near that kind of stimulus. And frankly, if they had looked at the economy more honestly, I do think they probably would have put in some stimulus, a half a billion, $500 billion, half a trillion maybe, as an insurance policy to make sure that you didn't double dip. Probably we would have been fine with no extra stimulus at all. But they came in with such a lavish, excessive spending plan that sparked inflation. And then they didn't stop, of course. Remember, they started with the American Rescue Plan, but then they were coming with Build Back Better. They had plan after plan after plan. And that also helped spark the inflation, even the ones that didn't pass, because people start to anticipate all of that money pouring into the economy, and it starts to drive prices and spending up.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The V-shaped recovery, Kudlow's V-shaped recovery. I remember selling that thing and getting bashed by the media. I was getting, just my old CNBC was bashing me. I mean, I worked there. I was a host for over 15 years. I was a commentator, and I was doing TV interviews on the V-shaped recovery, and they were killing me. I said, look at the numbers. Kevin Hassett and I, we used to pore over the numbers, all right? Kevin's a distinguished PhD economist. I've been in the economics game for 50 years. Those what the numbers were showing, and everybody was bashing us.
I think a lot of people didn't realize how great of a plan we had put in place to fend off the downturn that was going to happen from lockdowns and the pandemic.
Yeah.
That they said, oh, this must be economic ruin, right? This has to really be bad. So when you were saying we're going to have a V-shaped recovery, by the way, I invite everybody, if you're listening, you can go to this website called Fred. And it compiles all of the economic data that our government goes, and it produces charts for you. And one of the things you can look at is Fred is put in GDP by quarter, and it will actually show you the V. You can see that we went down and we came back up. It looks just like a V. Larry, we should get T-shirts with that V on it and wear it, or a tie. You could get a tie with the V's on it.
One last thing, Biden attacked the 10% tariff idea, and said it was going to, whatever, inflation, ruin middle-class lives. I don't think Trump said much about that per se, but what do you make of that? This is going to be the Democratic mantra, I guess.
It is, and they had their 16 Nobel laureates, all liberals, one of whom is married to Janet Yellen, write a letter and say, oh, this will cause inflation. Of course it won't. Actually, just normal standard trade theory. You don't even have to be somebody who's really in favor of tariffs to understand. Standard trade theory says that when a big country puts on tariffs, the rest of the world reacts by lowering their prices because they don't want to give up access to the market. So they don't let themselves get priced out. In fact, what they do is they lower their own prices. That's exactly what happened with the metals tariff. We actually saw that the other countries lowered their metals prices so that they could continue to access the U.S. market. In fact, that's an argument for why sometimes tariffs might be too low because other countries come in and they try to price themselves into the market anyway. It doesn't cause inflation. It may, at worst, squeeze domestic importers' margins, so their profits shrink. But you guys cured that as well because you had a giant tax cut.
That's the thing, right?
Right. So when you combine the tariffs and the tax cut, there was no margin squeeze. Profits improved. So it was a perfect combination. We can do it again. And when they're saying it's going to cause inflation, frankly, I think it's ridiculous. All of those Nobel laureates, not one of them said Biden's plan is going to cause inflation, and we got the worst inflation in 40 years. Now they scream Trump's plan is going to cause inflation. We didn't have inflation last year or last time around. I see no reason why we should. They didn't warn us when we did get inflation. They're not experts in trade or inflation. We shouldn't listen to them at all. I hope that when we have a second debate, if Biden is still running and he agrees to do a debate, I hope that Trump does hammer them a little bit more on the tariff issue because it's a strong argument and there's no reason why he should allow Biden to get away with what he did.
No, you're right. It's very interesting, too. Swapping out, put tariffs replacing taxes is something we all have to, explore some more and talk about some more because very interesting point of view. You're protecting, American industries. You also have some leverage for negotiating unfair trading practices. Meanwhile, you're lowering the tax burden. And if you do it through the corporations don't pay taxes, individuals do. And that's something we're going to have to argue about. Anyway, John Carney, this is a terrific piece. Debate showed Biden still trapped in his old economic lies. Folks, you got to track John Carney's Breitbart Business Digest daily stuff. Fabulous. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Folks, a quick break and then some stock market work with Stephanie Link and John Najarian. Thanks a lot.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
Let's talk some stocks, maybe some bonds. We've got Stephanie Link, Chief Investment Strategist, Hightower Advisors, and Head of Investment Solutions, and John Najarian, co-founder of Market Rebellion. I want to say to both of you, thank you for your patience. We were oversubscribed today. It's my fault, my bad, and I apologize. And thank you for your patience very, very much. You're both terrific. Begin with you, Stephanie. I don't see a lot of market action. It's all sort of sideways lately. Same with bonds, pretty much. The 10 years holding, it's at 439 on Friday, but it's in a fairly narrow range. Doesn't look like much is happening. I didn't see, the debate is a gigantic political story, but it didn't seem to have much of a stock market impact. So what are you thinking, Stephanie Link? Where are we headed for?
I think we have actually a sideways action until July 12th. July 12th, we get the bank earnings, and that's when it's going to start earnings season. And so between now and then, we have a jobs report next Friday, which will be big, and we're going to have, the Fed chatter and that sort of thing. But on the whole, we're kind of just hostage to the macro. Macro not so bad, though, Larry. Atlanta Fed tracker came in at 2.2 for GDP yesterday. You have some puts and takes. Housing is obviously weak. Not a surprise at all. I think we're at the trough of housing. And I think on the flip side, you've got decent consumer, personal income, Michigan sentiment, initial claims, PMIs expanding, and inflation's coming down. So all of it's very supportive of kind of soft landing. Soft landing is good for earnings, 8 to 10% earnings growth. And I hope, now I know hope is not a way to invest, but I do hope that what we're starting to see in the last week and a half is a broadening out, not just NVIDIA, but it's everything else. And I think that's going to continue because I think earnings are going to be pretty decent for other sectors.
Stephanie, have you ever met Goldilocks?
Is that what it sounds
like? I just wonder whether I know you have a wide circle of acquaintances, and I hope I'm still part of it. But is Goldilocks part of that circle?
Pretty not bad, right? Like, I know we all want to worry about stuff, but Larry, you and I talk about this. I worry when I don't worry, because that means we're complacent, right? So there's tons to worry about, but in the meantime, focus on the data. Data's not bad. Earnings should come in well. That should be supportive of stocks. By the way, not another 15% rally in the second half of the year in the S&P like we just saw, but maybe it's 3-5%. I'll take that.
There's no catastrophe out there. No catastrophe.
John,
not yet. So, John Najarian, have you ever met do you buy into Goldilocks? You may have gone out with Goldilocks. I don't know. I don't want to get too...
We used to have a casual relationship.
I love it.
By the way, great to be on with you, Larry, and with Stephanie. I think it is kind of a Goldilocks situation. Don't disagree with my colleague. And I think that there are some cracks in the armor. They're not major, but I'm sure Stephanie pays attention to these as much as I do. Nike, for instance. I mean, that was a horrible report. Revenue lower in Q4. I know On Running and Hoka. You know, Stephanie's a big runner, and I work out a lot. I haven't bought a pair of Nikes in years. The Hokas and On Running are what everybody's buying now. Nike does sell an awful lot of basketball shoes and that kind of thing, but they are struggling. Lululemon's struggling. There are so many parts that are reporting bad numbers, you know, Walgreens Boots Alliance, Warner Brothers Discovery. I mean, we could go through a bunch of them. But that's not me saying, the economy's falling apart. But it is me saying that there's a lot of big, high-profile stocks that aren't doing real well. And so, in other words, it's narrowing the outperformance. And I agree with Steph also that come the 12th of July, we're going to start seeing what the banks say consumers are doing, right down to the credit cards, which come through some of the banks, and then after the banks themselves and the pure credit cards start to report.
Stephanie, on the bank thing, which is very interesting, and bank stocks way back when used to be regarded as kind of a leading indicator of the economy's health or lack of health. So I'm just looking, the KBW bank index is plus 8.8% year to date, good number. Some of these banks, Citigroup up 23%, JP Morgan 19%, Wells Fargo 21%, B of A 18%, Goldman Sachs 17%. Very healthy story here. There was a concern about commercial real estate loans. I don't hear much about that anymore. But what do you know about it? And in general, would you be buying the bank stocks?
Well, it's interesting you said that because I actually added this week to Bank of America because it has lagged. It is cheap. And the stress tests, we got rid of that.
Right.
It's behind us. But here's the interesting thing about the stress test. So the stress test, the regulators are making the banks carry more capital than we thought initially. Fine. All these companies have an enormous amount of capital. What is interesting is that for the first time, they told the banks they do not have to get approval from the Fed going forward to buy back stock. They can do it if they have enough capital and the boards approve it. They're on their own. This is the first time since the great financial crisis, Larry. So that to me is a very big positive. And I think the big six have more capital than the big 20. And you're going to have the haves and the have-nots. And I think you're going to see a lot of different buyback announcements coming. That'll be a catalyst. And secondly, commercial real estate. They have all pared back their commercial real estate exposure. Most of them have A properties if they have within commercial real estate. Wells Fargo is the one that has the most. It's about 12% of their loan book, but only 2% is C properties. Everything else is A and B. So you got to be really careful on just painting the brush of commercial real estate, because A and B properties are okay, not great, okay. C, not so good. So you really do need to decipher between, also the haves and the have-nots.
Yep. John Najarian, I want to just talk a moment about bonds, boring as that may be. The 10-year closed at 4.39. Actually, was up 13 basis points this week. But will investors demand higher interest rates to buy all of the bonds that the Treasury is going to be forced to sell? I mean, we saw the CBO baseline. You're looking at $2 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see, presidential politics or not. So do you think, just have less than a minute left, John, will investors demand higher rates to buy the Treasury paper?
Domestic investors, yes. Foreign investors, no. And the reason I say that, Larry, is, as you know, an awful lot of our bonds are bought by people that live outside of our borders, people who live in jurisdictions where, for instance, in Great Britain, they're cutting rates. In Switzerland, they're cutting rates. So in those comparisons, we and our interest rates look significantly higher, and I would think very attractive to those investors outside our borders.
All right. Stephanie Ling, thank you ever so much. John Najarian, thank you. Appreciate it. Folks, quick break, and we're going to do some money and politics with Liz Peek and Steve Moore. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk some money and politics with with Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, syndicated columnist, and with Steve Moore, Committee to Unleash Prosperity Hotline, and WABC radio host More Money, which plays right after this show on many of these same stations. So two of you, welcome back. Liz Peek, how is Trump's economic message? And did Trump win the debate? I'm reading some of these liberal media. People are saying, well, Joe Biden was a catastrophe, but Donald Trump really didn't win the debate. Yeah, he didn't really win the debate. Like, he wasn't there. I don't know. You didn't really. The betting odds are now Trump 60, Biden 30. That's in the betting markets, but push that aside. Did Trump win? How was his economic message? Anyway, Liz, how was his message? I haven't talked to you since the debate. I got to hear this.
I know. Yeah. So obviously Trump won. All the polling shows he won. And so was it only because Joe Biden collapsed and was such an embarrassment? No, I don't think so. I think, first of all, Larry, what did Trump do? Trump didn't go crazy. He didn't rise to the bait when challenged by some pretty awful things that Joe Biden said. To be sure, some of the debate devolved into completely ludicrous comparisons of who could hit a golf ball farther. I think, by the way, that Trump won that exchange because the idea of whatever. Anyway, on issues, and particularly on taxes and finance and so forth, I thought he did a reasonably good job, but I have to say he missed some opportunities, because for all that the media has come out and said, well, yeah, Joe Biden was terrible, but my gosh, they should have been fact-checking Trump all the time. No one fact-checked Joe Biden. I mean, he had all these continued lies about the economy being in a shambles when he took over, and the Trump tax cuts, listen to this one, being responsible for Joe Biden's inflation. I mean, some of the stuff was just completely ludicrous and out of this world, but no one seems to have focused on any of that. So I think Trump did a good job not kind of going crazy with all of Joe Biden's lying about this stuff. I thought he could have made a more persuasive case, but he did well enough. And I think on issues, obviously Joe Biden was incomprehensible. So on issues, he certainly won the day.
You know, Steve, it's interesting. Liz is right. Right at the top, I was talking to John Carney of Breitbart about the same thing. Right at the top of the debate, Joe Biden sort of goes into this thing, how he inherited an economy that was collapsing, blah, blah, blah. And the problem is that, of course, led their administration to go into this massive stimulus, $1.9 trillion stimulus, which was the original sin, quote unquote, and led to the inflation. But they're still keeping that up, and it just factually was not true. We had a V-shaped recovery, quite a remarkable. And I thought Trump did a pretty good job defending his COVID actions too. But Biden lied about that. Nobody. But let me just ask you, Steve, the same question: did Trump win, or did Biden lose, or is it both true that Biden lost and Trump won?
Well, I think, look, the takeaway from the debate is that the chance that Joe Biden will be president this time next year is close to zero, in my opinion. I mean, I think it was such an awful performance. It was elder abuse. I mean, and the Democrats knew this, and they hid it from the American public. And it was, I was cringing, actually. And, I'm a little hard of hearing, as you know, Larry, so I don't hear that well. But most of the people I talked to agree with me. I couldn't even understand what he was saying. Right. Seriously, I couldn't figure out what he was saying. And so I think there's a little too much euphoria on the Republican side of the aisle, because as I wrote in the hotline the other day, I think that the chances are low that Joe Biden will be their nominee. I think they're going to go for a pinch hitter, and that's a reset for them. And I think the Republicans made a big mistake in agreeing to this debate before their convention. It played into the Democrats' hands, and we may be talking about, a Michelle Obama or the governor of California or Gretchen Whitmore, or someone who would be even at this stage, even Kamala Harris would be a vast improvement over Biden.
Well, I just have to ask, all right, both of you, so we're going to have a jump ball on this.
Yeah.
I don't understand how. In other words, Biden said yesterday, I'm going to stay in the race and I'm going to be there to debate in September. Good. And
excellent.
The Democratic National Convention, they would have to. I mean, I had Kevin McCarthy on the show, and I've talked about this with other people. Because of rule changes and because of complications with the Iowa state and the Iowa delegates, they'd have to do something. They've got to move before August 7th, but no one is moving. I mean, they'd have to actually. In other words, technically, physically, I don't see how they could do it, because they won't have a traditional open convention in the middle of August where you could have a delegate fight over president and vice president. They're going to do all that way before. It's got to be done way before August 7th because of this Ohio story, which I don't fully understand. I mean,
can I address that?
Yeah, I mean, how's this going to happen?
Because look what happened 4 years ago. Who was the front runner for the Democrats? It was Bernie. And what happened was the Democratic leaders went to the candidates, gathered them in the room, and said, "No, Bernie, it's not going to be you. It's going to be Joe Biden." And they basically handpicked Joe Biden to be the one. And that's what they could tell Buttigieg and the others. So that's exactly what they're going to do here. They're going to say, and by the way, how in the world could Biden, if he can't possibly be the nominee? He can barely get out an intelligible sentence. I don't think that the Democrats only care about one thing, and that's power, and they're not going to give it up.
But, Steve, I would suggest to you the difference between this round and last time 4 years ago, Bernie Sanders had not won sufficient number of delegates to win the nomination. And Joe Biden has. There's no question. So, I mean, I like you, Larry, I want to understand all the rules and stuff, and it's a little opaque. The Economist came out with a piece saying there is no way that unless Joe Biden steps down, there is no way he's going anywhere. And I would suggest to both of you, obviously Jill Biden has come in for a tremendous thrashing since all of this took place, because she's the one person who might be able to talk Joe out of running. And it's pretty clear she doesn't want to do that. My contention is she's protecting her family. And I don't think this is far-fetched. I think if Joe Biden is in the White House, Hunter Biden doesn't go to prison. I think if Joe Biden is not in the White House, there's a pretty good chance that Hunter and maybe James Biden, maybe even Joe Biden, goes to jail at some point for things that we don't know about. So I think it's kind of logical that she's fighting so hard to keep him running, I can't really think of any other humane reason why she would be doing that.
You know, before Steve falls off the cliff entirely, and before we have too much debate about who has a lower golf handicap,
right?
I just want to inject in a semi-serious note a great historical figure, Edith Wilson. All right, who was Edith Wilson? She was
the president.
Woodrow Wilson's wife.
Right.
And Edith, because he was incapacitated, now he had a stroke, so Joe Biden may have dementia, I don't know. But Edith Wilson was president for the last 18 months of the Wilson administration in the 1910s. Okay, it was really 1919 and 1920. So Jill Biden's the de facto president right now. And I guess she wants to run again. I mean, I guess that's the thing. Because I will say this. I mean, Liz's point is important here. And others, political experts have said this. For anything to happen, Joe has to voluntarily pull out.
Yes.
And I don't think Edith Wilson, Jill Biden, will not let him pull out.
Well, you're right.
I think that's
agree.
real.
I agree with both of you that the only way this happens is Biden. They can't force him out, but what they'll do is they'll just show him the polls and say you're gonna lose a landslide reelection. One of the things that came through loud and clear in that debate is these two candidates just detest each other. I mean, they can barely even look at each other. And so look, I hope you guys are right. I really do, and I'm just worried about it. I thought Trump. I give him a B-. I thought he was okay. I wish he'd been a little bit more factual and not just keep saying, you're the worst president ever. But he behaved himself, and that was really important because that's what people wanted to see. He was much more presidential. And this is a point you've made, Larry, many times in recent months, which is Trump has really grown. He's a better candidate today than he was 4 and 8 years ago.
Yes, and he had great riposte. I'll give him a B+. I agree. I would have liked to see some facts. By the way, he didn't mention the tax-exempt tips, which I think is a big winner. And
I agree.
He could have smoked Biden out. But he had a lot of good moments, some fabulous answers, and some great riposte. But I think Edith Wilson, Jill Biden. I mean, we all have to write on the TV this week. Well, I'm not going to be around, but anyway, we have to have a whole segment on Edith Wilson. Maybe I'll get the two of you to come on and talk about that. It's a fabulous thing. I got to take a quick break.
Can I also say one more thing about Steve's comment about the grandees of the Democratic Party? You've already had Clinton and Obama come out and say, no, he's fine. Yeah. It was just one bad night.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good news.
No, they did. Yeah. No, Lizzie's right. She's 100% right. They, the New York Times said resign, but the New York Times will endorse him. You wait and see. All right.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to come right back. Liz Peek and Steve Moore. We're going to talk about Chevron deference and Enron decision for the Supreme Court. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
Larry Kudlow. From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. We're talking to Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, Steve Moore, WABC Radio, host of More Money. I want to talk about the Supremes, very hyperactive yesterday. I want to start with the Enron defense because it has big implications for the trial, J6 Trump trial. The Enron financial securities law, Sarbanes-Oxley, was used inappropriately by special counsel, and they busted all these protesters, including Donald Trump. 2 of the 4 charges against Trump on J6 came from the so-called Enron, which is the intent to obstruct government activities or impede government proceedings. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not what it was about. That's not what it was for. It was financial security problems. So, Liz Peek, this is a big deal. And the special counsel is going to have to go back and rewrite his charges. And a lot of people, 300 people who were busted on this are going to be released from this charge.
Yeah. So a welcome ruling, because it was an absurd use of a financial securities issue to put people in jail for wandering onto the Capitol grounds. And that's basically what they did. I have to say, Larry, reading that legal thing some months ago and rereading it today, I kind of wonder why Hillary Clinton isn't in jail. I mean, really what it has to do with is destroying documents and other records that might constitute some sort of obstruction of justice. And if she didn't do that when she bleached her computer and did all that stuff to her server, I don't know who else has been more egregiously in violation of that law. But anyway, obviously it does not pertain. And I think it was a very broad, and obviously the Supreme Court said it was very broad and overly broad and inappropriate use of Sarbanes-Oxley to go after these guys. So, it's going to be interesting whether in some of those cases, whether there's anything else they can charge them with. Trespassing, do you go to prison for trespassing? I mean, because that's what I think a lot of the things will devolve down to.
Steve Moore, first of all, I thought Sarbanes-Oxley was a lousy law. Over-regulation. I mean, really. I mean, Enron did bad things. I get that. But Sarbanes-Oxley, I mean, I just think that George W. Bush should never have let that thing go through. But now what's going to happen for Special Counsel Jack Smith, he's going to have to go back to the drawing board. And this is going to totally, I was talking to Greg Jarrett about this earlier, this is going to totally postpone any of these J6 Washington, D.C. trials. And this is, the Supremes are going to probably rule also on immunity on Monday. And they're going to send it back to the lower court, and they're going to probably provide immunity for much of the civil and criminal. So this, again, the politics of this are so favorable to Donald Trump, don't you think?
I do, and I can't improve on what Liz was just saying, so I want to just pivot, if I could, for a minute to the other decision, which is the one on Chevron. And this is just, I'm going to keep this very simple for people because we're not all lawyers and economists and so on. What has been happening for the last 50 years in this country is that we created an unconstitutional fourth branch of government, Larry, and that is these regulatory agencies, the EPA, the FDA, the FTIC, the FTC. And these are fiefdoms that basically have become judge, jury, and hangman in terms of making laws and prosecuting people. And this is unconstitutional because we have three branches of government, not four. And what the court said quite appropriately is that the Congress has unlawfully designated lawmaking authority to these agencies. And I say it is about time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
By the way, this follows the West Virginia versus EPA, which was similar, which just basically said that the EPA did not have the direct congressional mandated authority to do what it's doing with respect to emissions and clean air and so forth and so on. Now this one is even writ more broadly. All these regulators. Now, Liz, this is an important thing because the Bidens have usurped the regulatory agencies to run the country, to run the economy, basically. That's their policy. This is central planning at its worst.
So so people should question, why have they done that? They've done it because a lot of the stuff they're trying to push through is not popular. If it were popular, Congress presumably could get itself together and pass laws. That's what they've really usurped is the power of Congress. And, the liberals are declaiming this decision saying, they're trying to make judicial authority the ultimate one. No, they're not. What they're doing is taking away the authority for Congress. Congress is supposed to set laws. And some of these things, I mean, going back to the EPA thing under Obama, It was a huge law. It had to do with all energy being produced in America. Mm-hmm. It would affect every single American. So you're telling me the White House, in a sort of whimsical moment, and I know it's not really a whimsical moment, it's an agenda-driven moment, can make that decision? No, that's just wrong.
Stalin would be proud.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, and by the way, what we've seen is when the government, and boy, this is just something we have to keep pounding away on, when they expand their footprint, it almost always goes wrong because you have a narrow group of people making decisions for the entire country. They're generally speaking not very well equipped to do it. They do it in a rush. Yep. And a lot of these things are done to avoid election deadlines or whatever. It's bad decision making and it's bad governing.
You think, Steve, serious question. So they've made this decision. Supreme Court made this decision. Just like the Supreme Court made a decision on canceling student loans. The Bidens will ignore it. I mean, Biden says he's going to ignore it. So we only got 6 months to go for them. But I don't think anything's going to change unless Trump wins. And then you have a whole new planning operation to rein in these regulatory agencies and, for that matter, the whole federal bureaucracy. I mean, that's what it's going to take.
Hey, look, the irony of this, of course, is that Biden is the one who accuses Trump of being a dictator and a threat to democracy.
Right.
He doesn't follow the rules of Congress. He doesn't. He's just basically violating the dictates from the Supreme Court. And you're right. He's going to ignore this, and maybe he's the one who should be on trial here. But to Liz's point, by the way, I know we're running out of time. The reason Congress punts on this is they don't want to make these decisions, Liz. They don't want to have to take on this. We don't even have a Congress anymore. They don't even pass laws. It's all done by these agencies.
Yeah, but that's wrong.
Yeah, I know it is.
Well, if you get 55 Republican senators and if they pick up 30, 40 House seats, because I think Trump's going to have coattails, good coattails. I mean, they've got to message it right. Kellyanne Conway was on, and they've got to message it right. But the fact is, you got a chance, and then you'll have real change. That's what it's going to take. You're going to have real change. Because this time, Republicans agree with Trump. In 2017, Republicans were fighting Trump. Anyway, you two are fabulous. Liz Peek, thank you ever so much. Steve Moore, thanks.
Thank you.
Steve's got more money on many of these same stations coming up. I'm Kudlow. We'll see you next weekend, folks. Thanks very much.